Good morning. This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net. And the program today is Avoid the Maze. And Avoid the Maze today is being brought to you by stamps.com. Since 1998, stamps.com has been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the services of the U.S. Postal Service and UPS shipping right to your computer. Whether you're an office sending invoices, a side hustle Etsy shop, or a full blown warehouse shipping out orders, stamps.com will make your life easier. All you need is a computer and standard printer. No special supplies or equipment are needed. Within minutes, you're up and running, printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send it. And you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off at one of their locations. No traffic and no extra lines. Cut the confusion out of shipping with stamps.com. New rate advisor tool. You can compare your shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option for you. Save time and money with stamps.com. There's no risk. And with my promo code POD, you got it, POD, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in POD, POD. That's stamps.com, promo code POD, stamps.com. Never go to the post office again. And I'm sure, Jerry, you can understand that because as podcasters, we spend a lot of time in our offices, studios, and homes. And those extra trips out of the studio take away from the important things we're doing. So on Avoid the Maze today, I have Jerry Fu with us. Did I say that right?
You did great.
Wonderful. And when I was introduced to Jerry's background, I was very excited because, we all need coaching of some sort. And, there's a lot of people out there online that claim to be coaches. And even to some degree, I sort of look at myself as a coach. But Jerry officially is a coach for the Asian community. So give me a little bit of background. Like, what made you think that your community needed more support?
Yeah, great question. I think just knowing my leadership journey, I think when I saw what kind of training I wish I'd had in order to be a more effective leader, I knew that this is not some fabricated need. I know talking to other Asian American professionals as well, they've come to me with conversations about, hey, I don't know how to talk to my boss, or my boss is upset with me over things I think are unfair, and I'm afraid if I bring it up that somehow I'm going to get in more trouble. And so to give people some level of confidence, some clear steps to make sure that the conversation stays productive and not antagonistic, and then to let them experience the closure that comes from knowing, hey, I'm so happy I can breathe a sigh of relief because I got through this conversation and, no one had to get hurt, or, like somehow the bridge is beyond repair. That's basically the reason I got into this. And as we say in coaching, the ideal client is who you were 10 years ago. And that gives you a clue into what kind of people population you want to serve.
Well, and it's interesting because, I grew up in a generation where you were taught necessarily not to ask questions. You're supposed to like listen to what was going on, absorb it, know what was right and wrong, and just move forward. And of course, never make a mistake. And that's not realistic, as we all know. And in this global world that we're living in, it's going to be very easy to make mistakes because we have a lot of preconceived notions. So, how do you, if, okay, you basically deal with the Asian population, but the Asian population has to deal with the whole population. So, how do you decipher what is cultural and what is not?
Yeah. It's an ongoing struggle, really, because so much of what we do and how we carry ourselves comes from some kind of culture, whether it's a culture you grew up in, the culture in your neighborhood, the culture your parents were exposed to, right? The work environment culture, right? These are all different things. And so it's almost usually culture has some kind of tag to just about everything that we do, right? And so if you're in a culture that says, don't ask any questions, take what your boss says at face value, and just find a way to get the job done, there are some merits to that, actually, because now people aren't just stuck in conversations about, well, what does the boss really mean? When it talks about this, right? Now you have all these committees that don't actually do anything because
Right.
they're using evaluation as an excuse not to actually get the job done. But other times, to be able to appreciate the why, right? Why does my boss want to get this done? Okay, this is why it's important. This is the benefit of getting this task done. Okay, now I have a greater understanding of the boss's perspective. Now there's empathy, and now I'm more in line with what the boss wants, and now we can support him. And now we can really be more unified as a team because we got clarity on the importance of the task and the benefits that come from it.
So, for the last almost 2 years, we've been living through this pandemic, and communication has drastically changed. A lot of it is like how we're doing the podcast today. Um, and some of it is actually done through podcasting like this, but somebody doesn't want their face seen. So they just put up their picture. And so now you don't have those um, facial expressions to figure out, like, well, I'm hearing the words, I'm seeing the face. How does it all go together? So, with so many people like working independently, has that changed the work that you're doing?
That's a good question. So, so right now I'm still splitting time between my day job as a pharmacist manager and also, working on my leadership coaching business. And it's definitely disrupted things. On the pharmacy side, less so because there is no opportunity for remote work with the pharmacy. Like
Right.
you have to be on site in order to comply with legal legal obligations, and that's fine. Um, there is a part of me that always appreciates having people in person um, to work alongside. And honestly, that's probably one thing that kept me sane during the pandemic, knowing I could actually still see people in person. The blessing with the pandemic and forcing people to go remote is that all of a sudden people are leveraging technology to reach all over the world in ways they never would have imagined. I've met podcast hosts in New Zealand, and I've met people in Australia and Europe, and the time zones that come with those are very tricky sometimes
Right.
to navigate. But so I guess in a way I've seen the best of both worlds in that, for the moments that you can't compromise on-site in-person work, that was hard. Don't get me wrong. I had several team members test positive for COVID and, dealing with the fallout from that. But then also, recognizing, hey, I don't have to limit my client base to local clients anymore. And I don't have to get on a plane to connect with people across the world. And so I'm grateful for all the people that I've met through podcasting and otherwise to things like this where we wouldn't have met unless we met online. So here we go.
Exactly. So, one of the things that I have noticed is that many of us who are podcasting, um, we're podcasting on things that we have found are important for ourselves to move forward. But just like you, your day job is in the pharmacy, which is totally different than you're podcasting. So what made you see that need and say, well, okay, during the day I'm on my feet, I'm, making sure the medications are right, which is a totally different mindset. And then on my free time, if you get any free time, I'm podcasting.
Yeah. The connection makes sense to me because I had to live it, but everyone else looking outside just kind of gets confused and they say, how did you go from A to B? And so happy to pull back the curtain on that journey a little bit. Basically, what I tell people is that leadership saved my career, and that pharmacy is a good set of skills. I love having the clinical knowledge that comes from being a pharmacist and helping people understand their medications and why it's important to take them as prescribed. And along the way, one thing they don't tell you in school is really how to refine your interdisciplinary, like social skills, because healthcare is a collaborative effort more so than ever, right? To lean on one person excessively is not a healthy dynamic. And we have doctors who believe, hey, I hung the moon, I'm in charge, you have to do what I say, kind of like what we said earlier, just take what I say at face value, I am the expert and you just need to trust me. But now, a new generation of physicians is recognizing, hey, you know what, there are too many drugs to know. There's too much for one person to really know. And so the sooner we get on board with, hey, nurses and pharmacists are not out there to take away my business and territory, but are actually going to help me navigate it more effectively, is the first step. So all that to say, hey, social skills and people skills play a bigger part in pharmacy. And, I've heard people knock on pharmacists. They're like, look, they just want to stand behind the counter and just count and not talk to people. And there are plenty of people like that. But if you expect to really have a lengthy, satisfying career, it comes from being able to lead people well. And basically what happens is when I got tired of my chain pharmacy job, because I had worked at this chain at the behest of my very loving but risk-averse mother that has never worked a day of her life in pharmacy, but felt that she knew enough to direct my career. So she's like, look, I don't want you to deal with the same employment challenges your dad did in his struggles as an immigrant in this country. I just want to spare you all that. So just work for this company. And for a while that was okay, simply because, I did, as long as I did better than like 60%, my boss is going to be happy with me. Right. But then from an absolute standpoint, my skills were atrophying, and, my aversion to conflict, like people would get frustrated with me, but I never felt the need to improve because it wasn't directly affecting my job performance or my bonuses, right? And when I finally got tired of that job and I said, well, I want to get into teaching, but I don't know how to, because I don't have a PhD or a residency to get a conventional academic job. But the opportunity that came up was through a pharmacy consulting company that taught students through local pharmacy schools. And so when a friend of mine who worked there said, hey, I know you want to get into teaching, my old position is available since I got promoted, do you want it? And I said, well, of course I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. And so I get there, I convinced them to take a chance on me. I walked away from a full-time job with benefits to take on a part-time job with the chance to become full-time. But 11 months later, I got fired. And a big reason I got fired was that my leadership skills were not nearly what they needed to be. And now I'm in a position where I have to improve. But the road definitely was rocky for a while, because I ended up at a job where I was filling prescriptions from crooked doctors and 4 of my paychecks bounced. And so that was a tough 9 months. And then finally got out of that position, got on with a more legitimate company through the help of some other friends. But they said, hey, we like you, but we can't pay you more than 8 hours a week. And so I said, okay, what do I do now? And they said, well, you can get more hours with us if you work for our store in Austin, which is about 2.5 hours away from where I was in Houston. And I said, okay. I went out there because I said beggars can't be choosers, and I have no idea what my life is going to look like at this point. So getting to the leadership part, and I know people are like, where's this going? It's all over the place, I promise you. I had the opportunity to help teach some leadership workshops through pharmacy nonprofit, some of my friends run. And so teaching leadership kind of got me out of this very negative fixed mindset about my own abilities as a leader, because before it just said, well, leadership is hard, I'm not good at it, I don't want to look incompetent, so I'm just going to stop trying. And now it was more of, hey, well, what if I could be a good leader? what would that look like? How would I carry myself? What work would that involve? And so when the opportunity to take on a full-time manager position in Houston opened up a couple months later, I said, I can't stay safe. I'm ready to come home. I have to take on these challenges. So I took on a manager position, and the next year proceeded to get written up by management because they were not happy with my leadership skills. My technicians were not pulling their weight, and again, my conflict aversion, right? The same conflict aversion that kept me from confronting my shady boss about not paying me legitimately is the same conflict aversion that kept me from disciplining my technicians and possibly firing them because they were not pulling their weight. And so, can continue to eat, humble pie, and take the advice of some friends and encouragement, and eventually got to a point where I said, okay, like I got out of the doghouse. But then that company had their funding pulled, so kind of this precarious moving parts transition in my career. And so the only reason I even got another interview was that I had leadership experience on my resume, right? And so I said, wow, that was a really good decision, because now I'm getting the attention of people. So when I say leadership saved my career, it really did. It opened up, job options I didn't have previously. But in pharmacy, right, this is what I say, is that these jobs are like icebergs. Like pharmacy jobs that offer high quality of life are like icebergs, in that they melt after about 1 or 2 years because the business models don't last in a very ruthless, competitive field. And so, after my last company went under about 4 years ago, I said, I'm tired of the grind. I'm tired of chasing scripts from doctors. I'm tired of fighting insurance contracts. But I love teaching these leadership workshops, which I had done consistently since 2012. And so what would a career look like if I taught people or helped develop people the way I wish I'd been developed,
Sure.
As a leader. And so did some research, started to talk to some other coaches in this space, but still scared because, I just didn't want to fail. I didn't want to do anything. And so it wasn't until the pandemic hit where I said, okay, I can't wait any longer. I better try to get this plane off the ground. And so, believe me, it's terrifying. It's a completely new set of challenges. As a pharmacist, I wait for business to come in because we have marketers that take care of that. I have a clearly defined role just to kind of process things. They come in, send it back out, and then it's done. But as an entrepreneur, now all of a sudden I have to wear every hat. And it's like, okay, well, which hat do I wear today and for how long? Right. And, it's terrifying. I'll be open a year officially next month. I'm barely, making enough money to cover my expenses. I'm doing private tutoring on the side to help kind of stabilize cash flow as I work to get more clients. But the best part, really, the most fruitful part has been getting on podcasts to increase visibility. And so, the irony is that when I was okay with rejection and just said, hey, you know what, here's my podcast pitch. If they say yes, great. If they say no, it's okay. It's just, the opportunity to move on. And I'm amazed at how many yeses I've gotten. In the past 2 or 3 months, I've done over 30 podcasts, and I've met so many great people in the process. So, yeah. So just to kind of pull back the curtain for, everybody listening, right? It's a dual, mutually beneficial conversation, right? I give valuable content, useful content for the listeners, and then also get exposure for the podcast host.
Absolutely.
And so it's been wonderful just having this mutualistic relationship and in the process networking in a very powerful way.
Well, and I'm so glad that you gave all that backstory, because Avoid the Maze is about the fact that so many of us, we're not sure how to navigate. Okay. Again, based on culture, we may have been taught, well, you chose this career, too bad, you're going to do it and you're going to retire from it, and don't ask any other questions. And then there are other families and other individuals who say, you know what, no, I picked the wrong career, or I picked the wrong course, and I've got to make changes. And we all want to be happy in life, and we're not going to be happy 24/7. But if you can find those things that encourage you, can make you better each day. And that's what I'm assuming has happened now that you coach, because even when you're doing your pharmacy job, and as you talked about, I'm sure you have some clients who come in there and they're really not happy about what they have to pay for their medication, or that it has to be substituted.
Mhm.
And it's sad that you have to take that grief, but with your now background learning, it's helping you cope with those individuals as well. Um, we all have to keep learning, and finding that right person who can guide us forward. And that's the other thing that I want people to understand. There are so many podcasts out there, um, but there's probably at least a bit of a message in every podcast that we can all reflect on and say, why didn't I think about that?
Mm.
And, you're doing a great job. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, not all the way through, because if I did, I wouldn't be working myself. But, there are so many of us out there now that are saying, I want to help myself, but I want to help others.
Mm.
How can I do that? And that's what you're doing. I think it's terrific. So, would you guide me differently than you would an Asian person? Because when I was looking at your website, it's basically the Asian population that you're helping. But is there really a difference?
That's a great question. I can say it this way, is that the paradox about niching is that a lot of new coaches are afraid that that takes away opportunities for business. The irony is that when you don't niche, you actually give yourself no chance for business, because no one knows what you're specializing and what you're focusing on, right? Because when I decided, hey, I want to help out the Asian population and I want to specifically focus on conflict, all of a sudden, three things happen. Number one, someone says, hey, I'm in that demographic. I believe he has a compelling story. I believe he can help me. I'm dealing with the problem. Maybe I give him a chance. So that's the first thing. The second is that someone says, well, I'm not in that demographic, but I know someone who is, because you give a very specific definition of who you help and say, hey, can I introduce you or make an introduction, right? The third bonus, which would be something in your case, right? To say, hey, I'm not in your target demographic, but those are pain points I struggle with. Would we still be able to work together? And rarely will I turn down paying customers, Karen. But in terms of style, to answer your question, what I tell people is this, and I believe this isn't entirely true. You are the expert on your life, right? And so to expect you to have a similar background as an Asian person wouldn't be realistic. But I think we all have similar pain points because we are all human. And so to find that overlap and still build on what is available for help and resources. And otherwise, if you wanted to hire me, absolutely, yeah, let's talk through, what kind of possibilities that unlocks and what kind of benefits that you could get from it. So yeah, I would coach you differently. But the most importantly is that I coach you effectively based on your personality and your strengths.
Absolutely. So this past year, and maybe I was oblivious to it before the pandemic.
Mhm.
I didn't see the conflict in our society with the Asian community, but all of a sudden the pandemic brought out all this information. Has it always been around and I've just been naive to it because that makes me feel sad that I was not more aware?
Oh, that's also it's a tough question. The fact that you even asking it says a lot. So let's celebrate that first. What I'll say is this. So I'll share an example of a conversation I had at a networking event several months ago. It was an international event, multicultural. They deliberately wanted to connect people, from different backgrounds who weren't American, but they also had plenty of Americans there who had an interest in international cultures. And an older white gentleman, meets me and says, hey, I wanted to just ask, like, all these hate crimes and all the things in the media, like, have you dealt with any of this? Like, is it really as bad as I say it is? And I could take this conversation as one of two ways. Like, one is that he was genuinely curious to say, hey, look, there's a lot of things here I need your help processing. Could I hear your opinion on this? Which is great. The other is maybe possibly downplaying just how bad a problem it is, right? Just like, is it really that bad? Like, are they just like sensationalizing it? And to some extent, yeah, the media will show what, gets them the highest ratings,
Oh,
right?
right,
And,
right.
right. So that's part of it. But this is the example I shared with him. Well, number one, we have an act in American history called the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? So by default, that is already in play. Like this is an ongoing problem for many, many years. But what I told them was this. I said, well, help me process, help me process this. Did you know that in Houston, Chinatown was actually built on discrimination? He goes, really? What do you mean by that? I said, well, they didn't want the Chinese population, throughout the city. So they deliberately sequestered them in like the southwest area of the city. Furthermore, they also divided up the district in such a way where they couldn't concentrate all their votes into one district. So not only did they sequester them, they kept them from having any political clout. And he goes, oh, and I said, so have I experienced any physical violence? Thankfully, no. But just because there is an oppressive system in place that doesn't cause physical violence doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. And so for people who are unaware, right? I mean, you didn't know about it, but at the same time, it didn't affect you, right? And unless you saw consequences firsthand, if you happen to have Asian friends that you see are being discriminated against because of things like this, okay, maybe now you care a little more. But I will always be thankful when people are curious enough to ask. And, this is one of those moments. So, thank you for asking.
Well, the big thing that I've witnessed in my lifetime are the bullies, and the bullies can be rich, poor, Asian, American, Indian. It doesn't make any difference. Okay. And typically a bully is somebody who's been hurt very deeply in their own life. And so when I developed Avoid the Maze, it was like, we need to be more aware. We need to start asking questions. We don't have to like everyone, but we don't have to hate. Okay. We're not all going to want to do the same things. Okay. If that were the case, we could just go down the street, find our mate and say, okay, you're going to be my mate and everything's going to be terrific. But it's not that way. We need things that are in common. And again, communication is what it boils down to. So about 3-4 months ago, I was in the outskirts of downtown Cleveland, and somebody said to me, well, you don't want to go there. And I said, why? And they said, well, there's gangs there. And I've been to that area numerous times, never seen it, whatever. But now I became scared. I'm not going to go there. And I noticed that my demeanor changed. And so when I was connecting with those individuals, there was a lot of hostility. Not on my part. I was one that was afraid, but they were becoming hostile towards me. And I realized, it was just somebody saying something to me that changed how I was looking at them, changed how they reacted to me. And I know we can't change it overnight, Jerry. I know that. But the more we talk about it, the more we realize that we are all in this together. Like, we need guidance. So where do you think your next step is? I mean, a lot of people out there, and especially through podcast.com, you and I are both meeting a lot of other podcasters. We're all working to get our words out there. I don't ever expect to make such an income, that I could retire. Actually, I'm retirement age, so I'm back at it. But what would you tell somebody who said, you know what, I want a podcast, and this is what I want to talk about? Would you encourage them, discourage them?
Yeah, great question. I think the first step is just to interview people who have podcasts already, right? I don't want to use the term research because research sounds boring and tedious, but if you take the time to learn, right, and explore, because like plenty of people will have 10 tips on how to start your podcast, or like 10 easy ways to start your podcast. And Anchor FM makes it very clear, hey, there's no startup cost if you use our platform. Just let us advertise just on your platform as you use it, and you're fine, right? So I would just say my initial response would be to just say, try for 6 months, get some equipment, keep your costs extremely low. When you want somewhat degree of professionalism, but you don't want it so amateurish that people are just like, did you just record this with,
Right.
on your laptop in your bedroom. But yeah, just try for 6 months, and then also just to say, hey, what did I learn from this experience? Is this worth my time and effort? Is there like an audience that would really respond to this, right? Because it depends if people want to monetize their podcast or not. That's another thing. Like if this is just a fun hobby, just to put some information out there, and it doesn't cost you a lot in terms of equipment or time, sure, why not?
Absolutely.
But if this is something where you say this is a marketing arm and I need to, make sure I at least break even with it, so it's really adding value to me and my listeners, okay, yeah, maybe you need to think about that. Because yeah, at the very least, the only way you're going to really understand and appreciate is if you actually try, and whether you succeed or fail, that will give you the insights you need personally to decide whether or not you want to continue it after a trial run.
So, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. If you just want to, find the conflict resolution coach. But the more direct way is through my website, which is www.adaptingleaders.com. There's plenty of free stuff, plenty of free resources for you to try me out, whether it's a blog on interesting and useful books, or a free download with a framework on how to navigate tough conversations, or just simply scheduling a 30-minute call. That's complimentary, just to tell me about what you're up to or what you'd like some help working through. Try that out. And, if you want a formal coaching package, great. But for right now, just visit the website. Tell me what you think.
Well, I would love all of our government officials to come to you to learn how to resolve conflict. It's such an important thing, and it's on all sides of the aisle. I'm not taking sides right now,
Mhm.
but when we see all that conflict just trying to run our country, then you can understand why there's conflict in the workplace, why it's happening in our homes, and why even friends are going head to head over some of the silliest things. I had somebody this last weekend who thought I said I didn't like their hair. And I don't know where it came from. And it was like, I don't know if I'm going to work with you anymore. And I said, whoa, we got to figure this out, because I don't think I've ever said anything about your hair. So we're hearing things right and left. It's a big, fast world that we're living in. We will have all these connections in the story notes. I'm wishing you the best going forward. And we'll have you on again, and maybe we'll talk about some specific conflicts that maybe the general public can get some help with. Okay.
Absolutely. Happy to do a part 2 or part 3 if the interest is there.
Sounds wonderful. Have a great day, Jerry. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen. You too.
Bye-bye now.